Welcome everybody to this class. Fascinating topic, an idea which relates to prophecy, an idea which relates to the future, and ideas which encapsulate a connection to ourselves and the higher levels of understanding which relate to a righteous person, a tzaddik, and in particular, our forefathers. So we recall in the narrative of the Torah that before Jacob's passing away, he called his sons to be around him. And he called them together to all be with them, to be with him. And they all came together, and he started to speak prophetically about their future, giving them blessings, and speaking prophetically about the future and future events. Now, I want to show you the actual text, so I'm going to share the screen, and we'll be able to see the text as we move along. You should see the text of Jacob calling his sons at the moment. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
So the line says, "Vayikra Yaacov el Bonov," that Jacob called his sons. Vayema, and he said to them, "Esifu, come together. Veyagido, and I'm going to tell you, and I'm going to tell you veyagido lachem es asher yakora eschem ba'achris hayomim, what's going to happen at the end of days." Now, Rashi makes a comment which we'll delve into in a second. Let's just look at the next verse. And afterwards he says, the verse says, Yikoptsu. Yikoptsu means gather together. Veshimu, and listen. Bnei Yaacov, children of Yaacov. Veshimu el Yisrael, listen to your father, Avichem. And he then continues, and he starts off with blessing and talking about Reuben. Reuben b'cheri, Reuben, you're my bechor, my firstborn, etc., etc. Now, what's very interesting about this is that there's two activities that happens at the moment. So I'm just hiding the two lines at the moment, the Rashi. And what happens in the first line, what happens in the second line? The first line is Jacob calls his son, and he brings them together. And then the second verse, seemingly, he gathers them together, and he asks them to listen to what he's saying. So the first verse is essentially he's called them together. The second verse is that he's called them together again. So what's the difference between the first verse and the second verse? So now Rashi then tells us, we're going to look at the Rashi together. So you should see the Rashi as appeared on the screen. Agido lachem, I will tell you. And what happens? Rashi then says, because lagalis es akates, he attempted, that is, Yaakov has attempted to reveal es akates, the end. Umistalka shchina mimeno, and the shchina nistalko literally means it withdrew, and that's the word. Nistalko mimeno, we say if a person passes away, his soul has passed away, same expression. Nistalko shchino mimeno, v'hischil, and he started omad devarim acherim, to say other things. Now let's ask that original question that we just started off with before. Why does it say, why does it say, gather and I will tell you? Veyagido, he says, ve'asipo veyagido, collect together and I will tell you. And then the second verse says, ikipsu, he collect, and the English translates as gather, but he joined them together. Literally it means, but kipsu means they join together. But Shimu, and he's selling, and he says, listen to me, listen to you. So let's ask that same question again. Isn't the verse being repetitive? The first verse, second verse. So what is the first verse telling us, and what is the second verse telling us? Is it not the same? Is it somewhat different? And Rashi is not telling us anything on the second verse, because the third verse, assumingly, the third verse immediately launches into the discussion with Reuven. So what's the first verse then? And what is happening to Jacob at this point? Why is the verse stressing to us and telling us there's in fact two events that's happened? So let's go, we're going to examine that, and we're going to understand this a little bit more clearer. So I'm stopping the sharing, and we should see each other correctly now. Interestingly, this is an examination of these ideas. What actually happened at those moments when Jacob says, "Come together." So it could be, there's a possibility, and in fact, which is what we're going to discuss, even though in the English it seems to flow quite reasonably, you could read it as saying that they gathered, that Yaacov gathered them together, veyagido, he joined them together, like the word aguda. Aguda means to make a collection, makes a grouping, right? So you could say that this means that the verse just flows simply ahead, that the verse simply flows by saying, hagid, sifo, collect, veyagido, I'll tell you, and I'll mention it to you, not using the expression agido meaning to collect, but meaning to say, right? Ve'asifu, I'm collecting you together, ve'agido will bring, and I'll tell you together. And then the second verse is just a continuation. Once he had them together, kopsu, he said, now listen to my words. And that would be a simple reading of the verse. But Rashi's, whose main emphasis and focus is to give you a simple understanding or a literal translation of the verses, jumps in and wants to, and explains them, and explains something quite extraordinary. He's saying what happened was that he attempted to reveal them something that perhaps he shouldn't have been revealing to them. And because of that, a divine spirit departed from him, meaning that's what it means, the Shekhinah withdrew, that the divine spirit departed from him, and he started to say other things. But if I say that the divine spirit departed from him, that wouldn't be 100% correct, because as the verse flows on, he starts to speak prophetically about the future for the 12 Shvatim. So the Shekhinah, the divine spirit, hasn't departed from him because he's prophesying. And in fact, in the prophecy, our rabbis teach us, and Rashi mentions in the forthcoming verses and the verses afterwards, that speaks about different times in the history of the 12 Shvatim. It can even speak about King David. It can speak about other events which happen for all the 12 Shvatim individually. So it's obvious that prophecy didn't depart from him. It's obvious that the divine presence didn't depart from him. Nevertheless, Rashi, in a simple understanding, tells us that in fact it did depart from him. So what exactly goes on, and what's forcing the rabbis to make these different interpretations, and particular the idea that he wanted to reveal the end. So because the verse said, but our verse said, the first verse said that he says, Ba'achris Hayomim, that Jacob says, I want to tell you what's going to happen with the Achris Hayomim, literally translated means the end of days. And we have in other parts, we have another part of the Tanakh where the Torah actually uses that expression, right? In Dvarim and Jeremiah, what we have this expression to actually mean the time of Mashiach. In the famous prophecy of Bilam, there's this usage of the word Achris Hayomim, which relates to the times of Messiah. So it looks like that Rashi is utilizing that idea and saying that Yaacov wanted to reveal them what will happen in the end of days, in the times of Mashiach. And that's what's Rashi saying. But he was given a sign, let's say, by virtue that the Shekhinah departed from him, so he started to say any other things. But what was this sign? Because he did say prophecy afterwards. So, in relationship to that verse which I mentioned, in relationship when Balaam says to Balak that I'll tell you what will happen, happen to these people at the end and the end of days, Rashi says no, that's not a reference to the days of Mashiach, but it's also a reference to the times of King David, and therefore we could then say that it's not necessarily that. At any rate, if Yaacov wanted to reveal the literal end of days, Mashiach's time, then why didn't he say it a little bit more clearer? And in fact, it seems that he could have said it in a more direct fashion. And seemingly, we try to understand why is Rashi himself citing it as a simple as his modus operandi is, that he only reveals, he gives us the more literal meaning. So our rabbis teach us, and it's clear from Rashi, that in fact there was two messages. Maybe there was even two times of gathering, but definitely, and perhaps the first verse and the second verse is at two different times. Notwithstanding that, it seems that the first verse and the second verse, the message to the children of Bnei Yisrael to his 12 Shvatim are different. When the first verse, when we use the expression Asifo, bring yourselves together, veyagido, and I'll tell you, seems that that is some sort of indicator that there is a deeper meaning. And in fact, Rashi's words, Rashi's interpretation that he attempted to reveal is actually the heading of Rashi's comment. Starts off with the veyagido lachem, not the asifo, not collecting, veyagido lachem. I want to tell you. But why use? But why use that if there's the specific thing that he wanted to mention? So the idea being that there is something wrong with the agido, the idea of assembling yourself, the idea that's potentially embedded in there is that Rashi is connecting this idea that he attempted to reveal the end to the word veyagido, which we translated simply as gather and I'm going to tell you, gather together and I'm going to tell you, that rather that there is some aspect in the word veyagido, the meaning of the word of veyagido, of assembly, and that I'll tell you, there is something embedded in that word that's the indicator, that's an indicator to us that something occurred in the spiritual realm, or that Yaacov sensed something in the spiritual realm that was directly connected to the Shechina nistalka mimeno, that the Shechina withdrew from him, as we translated. But what exactly was that? And then the next phase might have been the next moment, or might have been another time altogether, that everybody was joined together, because the second verse again says, gather and listen. This, that it was now a different scenario. Perhaps the status had changed. Perhaps the spiritual status had changed. And that's what we're going to investigate as we go into the shiur further. In general, the Torah can use a number of expressions for the idea of telling. So there's the word, as we've just said, as we've just seen. There's the word veyagido. There's a word amira, to speak. There is v'yoma, to speak. So this particular word that we've used has a specific connotation. In the Zohar, when it mentions about speaking, not necessarily on this, but it says that veyagido is a speaking which relates to an inner dimension of the soul speaking. The other two expressions are revelations of yourself, speaking to another person, maybe even revealing self, speaking to another, or speaking to yourself as another. But veyagido means a revelation of wisdom that is expressed expressed and becomes revealed. An expression, not necessarily a verbal activity, but a revelationary activity of wisdom coming to a person. Veyagido means something coming from the depth of the depth of the soul. As we know, sometimes the mouth can speak, but we don't really know if it's really coming from the heart. And in fact, the mouth can say things which internally you're not really feeling. And at times, even what a person says and what a person feels can be something different from what's really in the inner dimension of his soul. However, when we use the word to veyagido, to speak, this is an expression of the true willingness of the soul, of the neshama, to express God's will. That is to say that when the Torah uses the word veyagido, it's saying that there was something from the depth of wisdom in the soul, which is connected always with Hashem, that Jacob wanted to reveal. And that's what the first verse was saying. The first verse is saying that Yaacov wanted to express something from the depth of his soul, that which was a communication or wisdom from Hashem. And he wanted to join with them, to disclose it to them from the essence of his self. But in that case, why, if it was something so internal and so connecting from Hashem, why was, as Rashi uses the expression, why did the Shekhinah nistalik? Why did the Shekhinah withdraw itself from him as he was about to do the process of veyagido, to connect to his children by telling them the end of days? And in fact, why doesn't the Chumash even tell us? Why doesn't the Chumash even tell us that in fact the end of days was hidden from him? Because anyway, he's anyway speaking about prophecies and in the next verses. So why not make it more obvious? And the Rebbe teaches us an unbelievable idea, is that from the perspective of Yaacov, which from his perspective, at his last moments, he was obviously on his, he was weak, he was old, and he gathered them to tell them in his last days, as we have the verses prior to that, when he specifically called Joseph to give him the blessings for Ephraim and Manasseh. That was a time before that. He wanted to, at this point, he wanted to make sure and to put them together, and therefore he uses the word before, asifo. The verse when we saw V'yikra Yaacov el Bonav, he called his children V'yomer, and he said, asifo, put yourselves together, bring yourselves together, unite yourselves together. But veyagido, and I'm going to go through that process of veyagido, I'm going to reveal to you from the depth of the communications that I have from Hashem, the deepest knowledge that I have, the deepest knowledge that I have of the end of days revelation. And he assessed that if they would if they would put themselves together, connect fully, then they would be capable, and then they would be worthy of this revelation. But in fact, they could not, the children themselves, the Bnei Levi, the Bnei Yaacov, the children, the 12 Shvatim, they weren't of the level, they could not receive Hashem's knowledge of the idea of the end of days. It could not become present to them. It could not become connected to them. And because of that, that was the signal, that was the idea that the Shekhinah Nistalik, that the Shekhinah departed, not necessarily from Yaacov. He himself still had this knowledge. He himself still had the Shekhinah with him to be able to, as we see in the next verses, to be able to continue on with his individual prophecies for the individual Shvatim. But he couldn't force that asifah, that bringing together the children, his children, that they would be worthy to hear of the divine revelation. So the next verse uses a different expression. The second verse uses that expression of hikiptu, meaning again to gather, but it's a different expression. Veshimu, and to hear. Why use the expression veshimu, to hear? Because there's a difference when you see something to when you hear something. When you see something, you take on the entire vision and it comes in parallel. You understand everything. Everything puts it together to the extent that if you become a witness, an eyewitness to an event, no one can tell you that it didn't happen. If you hear about an event, then you could be convinced maybe it happened, maybe it didn't happen. But if you see an event, as explained in Chassidus, if a person is of the spiritual level that he can see godliness everywhere, then you can't convince him otherwise. He's seen it. And in fact, in the Bate Dinim, that is in the Besdin, in the court of law, in Jewish court of law, the only witness that you can accept testimony from is someone who, that is for major event, is someone who's seen it. That is part of being a witness, that you'll have to literally see it. If you've heard about it, that is not considered a witness in relationship to capital offenses. Only someone who's seen it. And this is what the tzaddik sees. This is what Jacob could see. So the first verse is Jacob wanting to give over the vision that he has, the vision that he has of the end of days, the vision of how the Jewish history is going to unfold till the coming of Mashiach and the revelation of godliness in its fullest sense. And that's what he attempted to pass on to his sons. But the second verse says that the divine presence departed from him, that is, departed from this veyagido, from this collection of everybody together, of the asifo. I just want to, just in brackets, just quickly say that the word veyagido literally means to say, right? But we're joining it to the first word and the second word, asifo, joining together, veyagido, to say and to relate, but connecting. So this level of connection, right, of the first verse, it was not working. And the evidence was nistalka Shekhinah, that the Shekhinah departed from him. Did it totally depart? No, because in the second verse, the second verse is V'kipsu, he brought everybody together, V'shimu, and they are to listen, they are to get the revelations, the prophecies of the level of hearing, a weaker level. And therefore, it doesn't span the ultimate event in Jewish history of the end of days. It spans the history of the Jewish nation for each in the presence. So in fact, there wasn't a total change that the divine presence Ruach HaKodesh left Yaakov, it left this gathering that they had, and that the gathering that they had of the first verse to the second verse was a different type of gathering. It was a gathering in the terms of the idea of shmiya, of hearing. But then we can ask the question, how come? What happened to, how is it that Yaakov made this mistake? Or how is it that the Bnei Yisrael, the children of Israel, the children of Yaakov, didn't merit this full understanding? The end of days is not for the sons. It wasn't of the level of the sons. It was of the level of Yaakov. As we've seen previously in previous, in the previous event, that when Jacob met up with Esau, and he saw the potential in Esau, that he was a person who lived not according to the Torah per se, but he saw within him the potential to transform all the areas not within the Torah to holiness, and therefore said to him, I'm ready to bring Mashiach. Are you ready? Have you done your job? And in fact, Esau's answer was that he was still a warrior. He was still against him, although temporarily they met up and they were joined together. Nevertheless, he wasn't ready for the revelations of godliness in the entire world. Here also, Yaakov's sons were not ready yet for the revelations of redemption. And this idea that this act of revelation was not available yet teaches us that we are capable of, and we are ready, that we can at least demand from Hashem that he bring about the era of Mashiach. And that's what we do in our prayers on a daily basis. We say to Hashem that now this is the time, this is the era when, after all the things that the Jewish nations have gone through, that we can be ready to accept the revelations of Mashiach, of the highest order. But in fact, it's important to understand another point. The idea is that Jacob himself, the tzaddik himself, was at that level where he could see Mashiach. He could see the end of days. He has the vision for the end of days. Therefore, when he became part of their grouping, when Jacob became part of the group, meaning the first verse, That is to say, when he said, Asifu veyagido lachem, when we come all together, I will tell you, I will reveal to you. When he joined together with them, his level, his spiritual level, his stalkus ashchina, the shchina went away. Same thing happened with Moses. When Moses was given the Torah at Har Sinai, he was given the luchos, he was given the tablets of stone, and then Hashem told him that go down, Radu, go down and see what's happening with the people. They're doing something with the golden calf. At that point in time, he was still holding the luchos, the 10 commandments. He hadn't seen yet what was happening, although he heard about it in some sort of sense. He went down, the verse says that he went down, he heard the noises. As he went further down, he saw the event, and then he threw down, or the luchos fell out of his hand, different ideas that are embedded in that. What happened when he was, the luchos smashed, the 10 commandments that were in his hand smashed. How could it be? They weren't too heavy for him before. One interpretation is given is that when he was next to Hashem, nothing's too heavy. He had the power of Hashem. It wasn't heavy for him. He could carry it. As soon as he came down and he saw that they had done something, all of a sudden, when he saw his people, the people that he was in charge of, they've done wrong, he's associated with them by virtue of vision, by hearing. The luchos became very heavy. In fact, they were so heavy he couldn't even support them anymore. He no longer had the strength to hold the Torah. They fell from his hand. When the tzaddik associated, when Yaacov associated with his sons, Moshe with his people, he was taken down to their level, and therefore could only prophesize according to what was relative to them, not what necessarily was relative to us. But the first verse tells us something very beautiful. Its teaching is that when you implement the first verse, you can achieve the end of days. Now, what was the first verse? The first verse was ve'asifu, join together, unite together in a way of re'iyah, of seeing, not of shmi'ah, of hearing, but seeing. Unite and come together with Jacob, to Jacob's level. Implore Hashem that we be capable of going higher and achieving Hashem's level, Yaakov's level, and then we'll all be associated with the strength of the tzaddik as well as our own, to be able to see the end of days, and we will then have the power to reach by our own individual connections to Hashem, the revelation that even though it might be of the level of Amira, of B'yomer, or the idea of Shmi'ah, but it will join together that eventually can lead us up to that highest level of veyagido. So a person could say, well, how am I supposed to be able to do this? Certainly this generation, if the previous generations couldn't do it, how can I do it? How can I do it? But the Torah is in fact teaching us that this was the act of Yaacov. Yaakov's act of actually seeking to be able to advance this revelation to his own sons means that every Jew has the power, and in fact at all times. And even when the nistalka meshchina, when the divine presence moves away, nevertheless, even when it's concealed, we are capable, and we should demand from Hashem the capability to be able to reach together and to be seeing the end of all days. And in fact, this is what we'd say that in our prayers. Zachzenu einenu, we say in our prayers in Shemona Esra, we should mirror to be able to see with our own eyes the revelation, and we should be able to, even in our generations, to be able to see. And therefore, we don't have the right to despair, but we need to be able to work on our own spiritual endeavors to be able to come to and to be able to accept and to be able to have those revelations and have the faith that we will be able to see Mashiach in our own days. And with that, I wish you the blessings for the rest of the year. And that in fact is the message of and how the parshas of Parshas Vyechi, where this happens, and the parsha afterwards, Shemos, joins together. The parshas of Vyechi is the prophecies, and the parshas of Shemos, the names, is the detail of how we have to bring things together. This is the detail of how we can affect the achievement of bringing together. This is the Torah and mitzvahs, is the plan, is the operational manual. It is the step-by-step procedure about how we can achieve it. That's what Torah and mitzvahs is that we can come to that point and to be able to bring together the vision that's expressed in Parshas Vyechi and bring it out to total fruition through the parshas which follow onwards, which is Shemos, and then bring it to its ultimate conclusion by seeing it at the end of days. And with that, I wish everyone a beautiful day and be able to implement all the teachings in our lives as we move forward. Have a good week, everyone.